Windows Virtual Desktop security spans multiple areas across the cloud. Today we're focusing on how we can secure our session hosts, and there is a lot to talk about as part of this micro series on securing Windows Virtual Desktop, so let's get into it. I'm Dean Cifola, and this is the Azure Academy. So we're going to be diving into three major areas today, and that is Azure Security, then WVD Security, and finally operating system level security. And there are quite a lot of things to talk about. Over in the Azure portal, taking a look at all the things that we could do at the Azure layer for security. This is going to be that cloud-based layer where we can use things like Azure Policies, the Security Center, and Azure Advisor, and then combine that with some of the other Azure services. So starting off with the Azure Security Center, and we have covered Security Center previously in the Azure Academy, so I'll link that up here on the top right. You can go check that out. Security Center spans multiple different layers of Azure, and that breaks down into three general pillars: policy and compliance, resource security hygiene, and then at the bottom here, threat protection. Now, we could spend the rest of the day going through Security Center line by line in each one of these recommendations, but I'll leave you with some homework. Go explore your own Security Center and go improve your security scores. Moving on, because we have a lot more to cover, we'll go to All Services and open the Azure Advisor. Now, Azure Advisor works on the same basic principles as the Security Center, but it covers more than just security. There are 5 major areas in the Advisor, and these are best recommendations from Microsoft for your environments. So again, something for you to dig into further and take a look at, which brings us to the Azure Monitor. Now, Azure Monitor works across many different areas as well, and you can monitor everything in Azure from your network to your activity logs, performance metrics, health of the Azure service in general, and all the way down to your virtual machines and each of the aspects of their virtual machines. And we're going to have a whole separate video on monitoring of WVD. And of course, one of the big tie-ins to the Azure Monitor would be Log Analytics. This is where we take all of that data from across all of Azure, including WVD, and we can store it in one place so we can run processing queries and analytics here to determine what exactly is going on. And let's go quickly up to the search bar, and we'll type in Sentinel and open up the Azure Sentinel. Now, this is an add-on for Log Analytics that is specifically security focused, and it's going to take all of the things that are going on that Log Analytics is aware of and instantly be able to tell you from a security posture how the environment is doing. And we have covered Sentinel as well in the past, so if you're unfamiliar with the basics, you can go check that out. So if we go down to hunting here, we can run all of the hunting queries that are baked into the system, and there are 82 queries in total. But that's not the end of the story, because there are also workbooks. And the workbooks help you to take that data and then visualize it. So I could go to the Azure activity logs over here, scroll down just a little bit and view the template. Then you can see my resource groups at the top here and all the activities that were generated by them, as well as activities over time in the graph, which users actually performed those activities. You see a lot of WVD admin stuff was being done, and it also presents a scatter chart of how all of those events took place. We can look at another workbook for Azure AD sign-ins, and lots of detail around sign-ins here. We can see sign-ins by location, and if we scroll down a little bit, we can see sign-ins based on conditional access policies and whether they succeeded or failed, and then troubleshooting sign-in issues, what the particular error codes are that sign-ins receive, whether or not they passed, MFA challenges, and all of that stuff. And we'll get into some of this a little deeper in our monitoring video, but I'll just leave you with that as a teaser, and then of course you can get into building some great dashboards based on all of that information. Going to our virtual machines, open up one of our VMs, and then we'll go to disks. And you can see at the top here is an encryption button. This is going to be able to turn on Azure Disk Encryption, which is going to protect the operating system disk from someone being able to download and walk away with it. So if we click encryption here at the top, we can choose to encrypt the OS or the OS and data disk. And once you've made that selection, then you can click here to select your key vault that you want to use. And if you don't have one, you can create one along with a key and version. And I'll just stop right here on encryption because there are some great new features around disk encryption, so we're working on a video for that now, so subscribe so you don't miss that one. And I know we're going quickly because there's a lot more to get through. So drilling in just a little bit more, we've got our FSLogix profiles, and those profiles live in some kind of storage somewhere. In this case, I've got it sitting in Azure Files. So there's all my current profiles at this point. But regardless of how you have FSLogix set up, we do need to protect those profiles in some way for disaster recovery, for backup, etc. Now, an Azure Files storage account or NetApp will allow you to take snapshots directly in storage. However, Azure Files can also be integrated with Azure Backup. So I've got a recovery services vault here, and under backups, you can see I've got one item protected, and this is my Azure Files storage account. And from here, I can force backups right now, or I can do a restore of an entire share or a single file out of that backup. And you could do that just by selecting any recovery point from any date and time, choosing whether or not to recover to the original or an alternate location. And then you can dig in and grab the particular files that you need. Perhaps just the user profile, hit select, and then you can go to do the restore. Now, speaking of FSLogix Security, let me take you out to the FSLogix docs. And the quick link to get here is aka.ms/FSLogix. And once you get here, over on the left, we'll type storage into the filter, and we'll click on this link to configure our storage. When you set up FSLogix, you will have a file share, and that file share should be configured in this way to have least privilege for the users. And the way this would look inside Windows, we right-click on our share and go to Properties. Then go to the Security tab and go to Advanced. And here we have my administrators group with full control over this folder, subfolder, and files. Here is the creator owner with modify over subfolders and files, and the users themselves have modify over this folder only. This is not the way that permissions will be added automatically when you bring in a user or group. You'll have to click Edit and then change which folder this applies to, depending on the user role and whether or not they have modify or full control. So that should take you a quick second. And once that's done, the individual users will be able to create their own folders on the shares as well as their own profiles, but they would not be able to go in and delete somebody else's stuff. Back in the WVD admin portal, let's get into some WVD specific security. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at our application groups. We have 4 application groups and 1 desktop group for each host pool. So from a security standpoint, it would put you in a better position to give your users remote apps instead of full desktops. Now, of course, this is going to depend on your particular workload and the applications, user expectations, etc. But the more remote apps you can present them with, not only will that be better for security, it will also be generally better for performance because it costs more resources of the system to present a full desktop than just an application. So along with this idea, how do we manage our app groups? So if I go to my first app group here to present Edge, and we go to the applications, we can see one application is part of this group, and we go under Assignments, and I've got one Active Directory group that's presented here for membership. So any user who I want to have use Edge, I would add them to this group. Now, I do, of course, have the option for adding individual users, but that makes management more difficult. Take this other group, for example, for Paint. When I go to the applications, we can see multiple applications are presented here. Rather than managing it just through Active Directory group membership, like I've done things for forever, I've got that group present, but now I also have all these individual users. Okay, so it's not easy to tell from one place who all has access. I have to look now in Active Directory and also check the app group. So from a security management perspective, it's much easier to manage this through a single group membership. Now, with that said, there is a place to have multiple applications presented through one app group for sure. But when you do this, it's going to be because that app group is related to a specific type of user or a role. And these are all the apps that they need to do their job. And that's perfectly fine. It's just a question of management and how you want to work, govern the environment. With that said, let's also take a look at our host pools. And inside this host pool, we'll go to Properties. And on the Properties screen, we have down here at the bottom, there is a flag that we can set here for having a validation environment. Back in the Azure docs, if we scroll down to the Windows Virtual Desktop section, and right here in the center, we can click on Create a Host Pool to validate service updates. Now, the validation flag will help you to see all of the latest updates that are coming through the host pool and the WVD service before they hit your production environment. So a validation pool should be set up that mirrors as much as possible your prod host pools, so you can see all the latest stuff that Microsoft puts out and how that will affect your environment. And over here on the right, you can see the update schedule, that this basically happens on a monthly basis, but there will be some more critical updates that need to get pushed out more frequently. And by setting the validation flag for your environment, that means that this pool can be used for testing. You can just select yes for that and hit save. Then if we scroll up to the top, we have our RDP settings. And the RDP settings is where we control the look and feel of the environment on a technical level. So for example, when people log on to a full desktop, what is their display resolution going to be? Do you want a fixed resolution size, a custom size, or let the computer on the other end figure it out? Do you want this displayed in full screen mode or windowed mode? And then we come down to some of the services, and there's more options that we'll have in PowerShell, which we'll dig into in another video. So subscribe so you don't miss our PowerShell management video. But for best security, we do not want to have local hard drives projected into the environment. If we did, then people could remove data out of our WVD environment, so we'll want to turn this to off. And that goes also for the clipboard and the printers, so that again, people cannot remove things easily from the environment. Depending on your configuration in your environment, you may want to enable smart cards for better authentication. And then we have the features for audio input/output. And once you've set those the way that you like, go ahead and hit save. And again, there's more options in PowerShell, which we'll dig into later. Now here's the WVD Windows client. This is the next part of security, is making sure that your clients stay up to date. Back in the Azure docs, if we scroll down just a little bit, we see all of the different guides around the clients. And I'll go to the Windows client here. And if we scroll down, we've got the download for 64, 32-bit, and ARM. And if you click on that to download, it'll just start a download of an MSI for you. And you can see all the latest details and information about those clients and what the fixes are that are being introduced. And I'll have this page linked in the video description so you can easily find it. So I'll sign into one of my desktops using that latest client. And here we are logged in as the Hulk. Now, one of the cool things that's in the latest client is up here at the very top. See the RDP bar that we have up here? If we click on the connection information, we've got a message that says your connection network round trip time is good. But now there's a see details. And when you do, it'll give you all the details about your connection, what client you have, what your timestamp is, the activity ID, which we'll get into more in monitoring, as well as the network details. I've got a 22 millisecond round trip, just over 13 megabits per second bandwidth, not using any frames at this point. And I've also got the details of which gateway I'm connected to and my host. And you can then Control C to copy this information to share it with your IT folks in case you're having an issue. And with that, that leads us into operating system level security as our last major part of this video. And of course, there are about 10,000 ways that you can secure your operating system, so we'll be covering some of the highlights. Now, the first thing that I want you to notice is that my screen here is going to go black in a second or two. I've got some group policies in place, and those policies dictate how my environment functions. And I've got a particular one about idle time. That says if the screen is left idle, and this works for apps as well as desktops, basically turn on the screensaver and lock the system. Okay, this is the easiest way to make sure that your screens aren't being left idle. People could just log in, don't ever walk away from your system without locking it. And you can enforce this like I have through a group policy. And you probably don't want to have it set for 30 seconds in your environment like I do. That would drive your users insane, but figure out what's reasonable in your environment. And I just need to put in my password to log back in, and I'm right back to where I was. Back in the group policy management console, I've got a few different policies set up for how my environment functions. We'll start off with this WVD policy. Under the user configuration policy admin templates, this is where I've got for forcing the screensaver like I just showed you. A few other policies to support that, to password protect the screensaver, prevent users from being able to change it, and also setting my 30-second timeout, which again, you should set appropriately for your environment. Under the computer configuration section, we've got a few other policies, and these are to help users to be able to drain out of the environment. So if they're idle for a short period of time, we've got our screensaver to kick in and protect us. But then after that, there's going to be some amount of time where we eventually want the user to be disconnected from their session, and then a further amount of time where we want to force them to log off because obviously they're not using the system. So take a look at those settings and then do what's right in your environment. So if you are going to be allowing your users to access the full desktop, you may want to consider AppLocker. So AppLocker will actually restrict or enable certain applications from being run in your system based on user groups and other default rule sets. This is very helpful if you're just using Windows Virtual Desktop as a jump server environment to get into your regular corporate environment. The only thing people should be using in those situations would be the RDS tool itself. So you'd want to use AppLocker to enable that but block everything else. And inside your group policy editor, you can drill down into the application control policies, and that's where you'll find AppLocker. And there's 4 different sets of rules here. I'll start with Windows installers. Basically, I just have a deny all rule that blocks my WVD users from being able to install anything. And then I've got another executable rule here that's going to allow the RDP client to function, but deny everything else. And on the subject of being able to join things, I've got a special user here that's used for joining VMs to my environment. So this is my AD join user, and I've delegated this permission. So in Virtual Desktop, I can only join users to the appropriate OU where all these policies take place and everything else with this special AD join account. And you do that through delegating control, selecting your particular user, and then we would create a custom delegation task. And this would only be related to computer objects. And then we check these other items as well. And under the next section here, and if we scroll down a little bit, we need to reset passwords, read and write account restrictions, and then also validate, write DNS host names and service principal names. Then you can go and complete the wizard, and then you can look at the advanced properties for the security rights and see all of those particular functions. Another way to keep your session hosts secure is to make sure that they're using the latest version of the operating system, patches, as well as your applications are kept up to date. And this integrates very well with the shared image gallery, and that's in a recent video that we did on the Azure Academy, so go check that out if you missed that. This will allow you to make multiple versions of your image and then use that latest version of the image inside the WVD admin portal so that you can build new session hosts from that latest image. Inside the host pool, you go to Session Hosts and then click Add. Hit Next for the virtual machines, and that will reference your latest image from the shared image gallery. And that will enable you to turn over the VMs in the host pool rather quickly with a minimal amount of effort. And the final area that I want to just briefly touch on is that of antivirus and anti-malware support. Of course, every Windows machine has Windows Defender installed by default, but there is another optional security step that you can take. That's using Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection, or ATP. And I want to give a quick shout out to Wes Thomas, who's an M365 subject matter expert who helped me on this section with ATP, because it's definitely not my area of expertise. So follow him on LinkedIn and thank him for his contributions. From the WVD docs page, we'll go under resources and then go to Tech Community Support Group. And in the search field, we'll just type ATP, and then we'll click this first link. Now, up until now, ATP has not been supported on Windows 10 multi-session, but this feature is now in preview, up to 25 concurrent sessions on a single VM. Now you scroll down just a little bit here, and there is a link to follow the instructions for Windows 10 based machines. And we'll click the link for onboarding non-persistent virtual machines. And there is another link here for starting a free trial, which will open in the background. You can go through this sign-up process and accept the license conditions after you've read them thoroughly, of course, and hit next, and then provide all your details, and you'll be met with this setup screen. And this will just walk you through quickly setting up Defender ATP. And we'll click next on this first screen. And then you need to choose where your data will be stored. Now, if you choose a location now and then want to change it later, you will have to open a support ticket for that. But we'll select US for the moment, and then we'll scroll down a little. And 180 days of retention is just fine by me. And then it asks for your organizational size. And then at the very bottom, if we scroll down a little bit more, there is a feature flag here to enable preview features, which you can leave on or off. That's up to you. And then click next. And you want to confirm these settings because, again, it will take a support ticket to be able to make changes. And then the setup will go ahead and create your Defender instance, and that'll just take a moment. And once that's done, you'll be brought to this screen where you can onboard your first system. And then from here, you can select in the dropdown which kind of operating system you want to protect. In this case, we're doing Windows 10. And then for the script here, you want to choose the VDI onboarding scripts for non-persistent devices. Then you go ahead and download that package. Then we'll scroll down a little bit here and we'll copy this PowerShell script because we're going to need that for the next step. And inside our VM, we'll extract that package. And then we're just going to run the command file as an admin, which will just take a moment. And once that's done in a admin command prompt, we'll run that PowerShell that we got out of the ATP portal. And that'll just take a second. And back in the Defender Security Center, we can see our VM was onboarded successfully. And you can click on the VM to see any of the details, as well as a timeline of anything that happened with this device, different security recommendations, as well as a full software inventory, a list of discovered vulnerabilities, and any KBs that are outstanding on the system. And then at the very top here, we've got a few controls. Run an antivirus scan right now, as well as restrict any apps from being executed on the machine in case there's a problem. And if things are really bad, we can fully isolate the device. And finally, back in our VM, when you're ready to onboard your entire estate into ATP, you can do that by opening the File Explorer and navigating to the C Windows System 32 Group Policy Machine folder, and in there you'll want to create a new folder, and we'll call that scripts. And then inside scripts, we want to create a folder called startup. And then we can take the very same command file that we were working with earlier and copy that into that directory. And then we can capture and make a new image version out of that, which will then add ATP to all new machines going forward. So I hope that you've enjoyed looking at the many ways that we can secure your session hosts as part of WVD. And of course, each one of these different sections you could spend several hours or days on, and it's all just too much to cover in a single video. Please check out the other videos that I referenced in follow-up as you go ahead and secure your environments. And if you like this video and learned something new, go ahead and click that thumbs up icon and let me know that you appreciated it. And if you have any questions on what we covered today or anything else around Azure, give me some comments down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and click that subscribe button and join us at the Azure Academy community, where we're all just trying to help each other learn more about Azure. And if you'd like to get notified when our new videos come out, which is about once a week, you can go ahead and click that email notification bell. And we have been premiering our new videos on Monday at midnight Eastern time. And if that time works for you, please join us. I'd love to chat with you while the new videos are released. And if you're looking for something more to watch, you can go ahead and click the video on the top right. That's our latest video. Or you can click the one on the bottom right that we've selected just for you to help you keep learning more about Azure. Thanks very much for joining us for today's video, and we will see you in the next one. Happy learning.